Right, hi everyone. Now I've just finished this painting, Pink Sunrise, and I've painted this using acrylics. Now I'm going to show you two techniques I use for blending with acrylics. Just to get these sort of soft gradients, these nice soft clouds. Now I'd just like to add, I haven't actually used any acrylic mediums whatsoever for this painting. So I hope you enjoy the video. Thank you. Now I'm going to start by just spraying some water onto this panel, and I'll just evenly brush that out. What this does is it actually helps blending the initial wash when I put it on. If I didn't do this, as soon as I touched the panel with the paint, it would instantly dry. It'd be very difficult to blend then. Right, I'm going to start this sky with a very diluted wash. Now, the colours I'm going to be using for this are going to be Phalo Blue Light, Paynes Grey, Titanium White, Yellow Ochre and Quinacridone Magenta. Now, I'm actually using fluid acrylics for this painting. I find the fluid ones are much easier for blending. We'll start with the Phalo Blue Light. Now if it is looking a little bit dry, I can always add a little bit more water. But because this is acrylic, of course, I've got to work fairly quickly. I'm just going to add a tiny amount of Paynes Grey to that blue. Now I'm using a 3-inch Mottler brush for this. This doesn't have to be too perfect, this initial wash. A lot of this will be covered by clouds. Now the problem is we've got to go into this sort of yellow ochre, sort of peachy colour. So we don't want to get any green, that's why I'm adding some magenta to this yellow ochre. So it's probably a little bit too pink there, I'll just put a little bit more yellow ochre in there. I just want this sort of peachy colour really. Hopefully, fingers crossed, I can avoid anything going green. Too green anyway. Try to avoid green as much as possible. Now that's blending quite nicely. Now if I hadn't have wet the panel first, there's no way I'd be able to do this. Right, that will do for the initial wash. Once that is fully dry, I can then start putting the clouds on. Right, for the clouds I'm using a mix of Quinacridone Magenta, Titanium White, Cadmium Yellow and Paynes Grey. Now if I look at the reference photograph, you can see the clouds at the top are a fairly dark colour, it's like a Paynes Grey going into purple. So what I'll start to do is I'll use some of this Paynes Grey, mix some of that with some titanium. And that's quite a cool sort of colour for the clouds right at the top of the painting. I'll just put a touch of magenta in there just to warm it up. And it just gets that sort of purple look going to it. Now that's just going further down the sky, sort of this purple grey colour. Now what I tend to do here is I'll just increase the magenta as I go further down the sky towards the horizon. Put a bit more titanium white on there. So I get this now, it's quite looking fairly pink, but it's just the wrong colour of pink really. So I just put a little bit of cadmium yellow in there. A bit more white. Now it's just a case of mixing these 4 colours in various quantities just to get the colours that I want. You know, just looking at the reference photograph and just picking out these colours. Now, because this is acrylic, I can't really pre-mix all my colours and show you like I do with the oils, because they tend to dry fairly quickly, these. So what I will do is, that's why I'm just using really 4 colours, because I'll be mixing and painting at the same time really. So if we look at the reference photograph, you can just see how I mix these colours for the clouds. Now I'd just like to point out that if we do mix some of the Paynes grey, which is quite blue, with the cadmium yellow, you will get a dirty green. So just beware of this. I'll just show you what happens. So we've got that. Just put some cadmium yellow in there, and you can see this quite a, oh, it's a lovely green colour, don't get me wrong, but it's not what I want for the sky. So it just has that, well, it's that greeny tinge to it, you know, it's just not the right colour for this sky. So I've got to be very careful mixing the cadmium yellow and the Paynes grey. I've got to make sure those don't really meet as I'm mixing the colours for the clouds. Right, now for the clouds, I need that little bit more precise control over my blending. So I'm going to use a scumbling technique. I'm going to have to use this because really the acrylics, they dry so quickly. So we'll crash on with that now. Right, an old brush like this is absolutely ideal for a scumbling technique. Look at that, perfect. Right, now I've hardly got any paint on the brush at all. I'm just using a mixture of the Paynes grey, the magenta, and a little bit of titanium white. Now I'm just looking at the reference photo. So I've got a bank of clouds coming down here. Just mark them out slightly. Now if I find I've added a little bit too much, I've got a wet paper towel here, I can just dab that. Just take some of that paint off. And because I want to work wet on dry, I'll wait until that actually dries before I go back to that part. Otherwise I'll start to get quite a lot of brush marks, and I don't want that. Still quite a lot of magenta in this area here, so as I move further up the painting, I'm just going to use less magenta, as you can see here, and just more of that Paynes grey with a little bit of titanium white. I'm just going to tint this now with some cadmium yellow. Just gently brushing over the surface just to tint this pink. Just being careful not to put too much into the Paynes grey. Got to avoid those greens. And as I've said before in the past, when doing skies, I don't tend to follow the actual exact cloud formations from the reference photograph. It just gives me an idea, just gives me a flavour of what the sky's doing really. I tend to make it up as I go along. It's actually easier doing that. But you can see what I mean about the technique for blending with acrylics here. Using this scumbling technique, because I'm using this scumbling technique, it's just a case of applying a very small amount of paint onto what is already dry. It's just building up the layers. Now the important thing is when you're using this technique is your surface of the panel or your canvas. An even grain in the canvas would be ideal for this technique. On this panel, what I've done is I've actually rolled on the gesso, so I've not brushed it on and got large brush marks. I've just rolled it on and I've got this nice, almost got a fine sandpaper texture to the surface. Now I'm using various size brushes for doing these clouds, but the important thing is they're fairly stiff. They're not too soft. I don't want any really soft bristles with this technique. That's why, as I said before, usually older brushes are ideal for this. Certainly my older brushes anyway, because I don't look after my brushes just exactly as I should. I always start off with good intentions with new brushes, but I won't clean them quite as thoroughly as I should do. Right, I'm just going to start the midground and foreground of this painting with some Paynes grey here. Here I'm just adding some white and magenta to the horizon just to lighten it up a touch. Now I'm working fairly quickly here because I'm working wet on wet, so I just want to keep everything sort of blending nicely. I just want to keep those edges nice and soft. I don't want anything drying with a hard edge here. Just finding the shapes of those distant hills. I say working really fast just to blend these acrylics while they're still wet. Just adding some titanium white here just to lighten up this mid-ground. Right, now this horizon line is just a little bit too sharp, so I'm just going to soften it. It's still wet actually, so I'm just adding some titanium white here and just blending this in on this sort of purple grey colour. Just want to get some really nice soft edges to that horizon line here. So again, I'm having to work fairly quickly. I'm just adding a mixture here of yellow ochre and Quinacridone Magenta, just to get this sort of nice warm glow to the hills in the background. Again here it's actually dry as the purple grey colour, so I'm just scumbling this sort of like just tinting really with this magenta here, just to warm up this. I really want to get that sort of warm glow coming through because this is where the sun's actually rising up. So again, it's this scumbling technique for the blending here. It's so important when you're doing this to actually have very, very little paint on your brush. Let's go over with a little bit of white here. Now for this foreground here, the Paynes grey I found wasn't quite dark enough, so I've decided to add some black here. For my landscapes I tend to stay clear of black, but I think here it just happens to work. I really want to get that sort of contrast for this immediate foreground. Now you notice here as I'm putting these field boundaries in, I'm not using any fine detail, it's just keep it nice and soft and loose. I'm just really suggesting these field boundaries and these distant trees. I don't really want to be adding too much detail here. It would just completely spoil the sort of effect of the painting. I'm just using a much larger brush here for the foreground trees. There isn't really a right size or a wrong size brush for anybody really to use here. It's just whatever feels right for what you're actually painting. Now I just put a little bit of light going into that sky, and just on the horizon there where the sun is rising. Just really want to get that effect of, you can almost imagine the light, the sunlight just behind that horizon there. I mean, it really is important to get this right because it is sort of the focal point of the painting really. Now if I do put too much on here, as you can see, I just wipe it off, I just dab it off with a wet rag. But again, because it's acrylic, you've got to work quickly. Now as far as using retarding mediums to slow down the acrylic paint, it's really a personal choice. I don't particularly like using the retarding mediums because I suppose I'm used to how quickly the paint dries when it comes straight out of the tube, or when I'm adding water, so it's just something I'm used to really. So yeah, and with the retarding mediums I find, yes, you know, it keeps the sort of acrylic open and wet for a short, well, sort of a little bit longer, but it tends to, I find it just tends to change the consistency a little bit and goes a little bit, I don't know, sort of like a syrupy sort of feel to it. It just tends to, it just seems to change. Well, that's why I've decided not to use any retarding mediums in this painting. In fact, I tend not to use them for any of my acrylic paintings. Now I'm just adding this tree here. I think it just needs something just to give this painting some sort of perspective. You can really see here, especially in this picture, you can see the surface. I was talking about before how I prepare the surface before I start painting, and it is, you can just see how it's just got an even texture, but it's not smooth. And this, as I say, is ideal for the scumbling technique. I also use this sort of surface for a sort of watercolour technique when I'm using the acrylics, and also a sort of watercolour technique for oil painting, which I'll be showing soon on this channel. As I say, when you're using canvas, you don't really need to make this sort of surface, give this surface texture. The canvas weave just does it naturally for you. Right, we'll come to the end of this painting now. Thanks for watching if you've made it this far. I hope you've got some value out of this video. And don't forget, please, if you've got any questions whatsoever, please just leave them in the comments. I really do enjoy answering your questions, so that's what I'm here for. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.